Hey everybody, this is Al. We're here in Philadelphia. Where else would we be? We once went to New York. Wow, that was complicated.
Yeah, that sucked. Let's not do that.
And we went to Washington, D.C. last year. And wow, that was complicated. Next year, we're going to Michigan because John Womack is inviting us. What town are you from, John? Can you give John a portable mic? John Womack is here in the room at the Kelly Writers House in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and he came all the way from Michigan for this. John, please put the mic up to your mouth and tell me why the heck you came all this way to see us.
Why, Al, you invited me.
I did.
You said, come
but
on
I invite
down.
a lot of people. Not everybody comes.
But I'm just visiting the East Coast, so I thought I'd stop in here and see you guys.
Fantastic. That's great. It's so strange and disorienting to be hosting a... No, you're great. You're not strange and disorienting. It's so great to be hosting, so strange to be hosting a global course and then see John Womack in the forums this week, and then there he is. Anyway, thank you.
You guys are doing a fantastic job, by the way. It's a great class.
Thank you, John. I hope sometime in the next hour you'll do your thing. We'll ask you a question. We have here in the room, besides John Womack, who came all the way from Michigan. By the way, snaps for John Womack from Michigan? Okay. We have Janice and Nelson, who I think are both here for the first time, or second? First time. Andrea. Michael's here, although he's squirreled away in a corner doing a sketch from a... Zach, can we get Michael's unusual angle on the sketching? We have Mary here. Hi, Mary. Great to see you. He's already sketching. What are you doing? Who are you sketching? Is that John Womack?
The audience.
Okay. We have Mary here, one of our wonderful CTAs, and John and Kirby, and Dave Bender is here. Hello, Dave. And we have at the table Lily Applebaum. Hello. And Caroline is here, and Caroline is going to help me look at forum questions.
Yes.
Hello, Caroline.
Hello.
Thank you for doing that Richmond meetup.
It was great.
Yeah, it's a pretty cool thing, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
It's so amazing. And Carlos.
Hey.
Hello, Carlos. And we have a kind of a record turnout here, not quite a record, but I see Allie Castleman from New York. Hello, Allie. I'm not hearing Allie. Zach? All right, Chris and Zach are going to figure that one out. Allie, we didn't hear you, but your mouth was moving, and that's good. Emily Harnett in New Haven, can we hear you?
I hope so.
That's terrific. And I believe, I see Erica there. Hello, Erica. It looks like from your room, you're upstate.
I sure am upstate,
Okay,
but at
great.
least I'm home.
You are home, it's good, not in your office.
Nope.
And Molly is here from Los Angeles. Hello, Molly.
Hello.
Hey, and I believe we have Dave and Max joining us as well a little later. Okay, let's check Allie's sound again. Hi, Allie.
Just figuring it out.
Nothing? No? Oh, Allie is mute tonight. Okay, and we have Anna Strong here, who's on the phone, 215-573-9752, 215-573-9752, and we have Jason, who has the portable mic. And we're really ready to get into Chapter 9.1, the first of 3 chapters in 3 weeks in Chapter 9, which is a kind of a 3-pronged and not entirely random, but not complete survey of sort of, we'll call it founding contemporary poetry movements. And I know this is relatively difficult stuff, at least the ideas are, but we're game to talk about it. So give us a call. The second caller is going to get a copy of Julia Block's previous book, Letters to Kelly Clarkson. Second caller gets this wonderful book. And while I've got the camera close, Zach, I'm going to shout out to T, who made these cards last year or the year before. And I love them, and I'm just happy. And they're in my office all the time, T. This one says, do the work. Poetry nerd and proud. Carlos, that's going to be for you. When I retire, you get my stacks. Urge and urge and urge. Where's that from?
Whitman.
Walt Whitman. That's a great line. Urge and urge and urge. What's this one say? The how of what you say is what you say. That's not actually what I said.
I would
She
trust
couldn't
T.
fit
I
it
don't
on
know.
the top. You trust T.
It was the how
Trust
of what
me,
you said.
let's face it. Oh, here, and look what it is. It's birds on a wire. Is that a reference to the blackbird? Where do we get birds on a wire, though?
Leonard
Yeah,
Cohen
yeah,
song?
it's a Jim Croce or something like that.
No, Leonard Cohen.
Leonard Cohen, even better. This will be the last one. Go home, read lunch poems, hunker down. She didn't say jack off there. It's a clean card. Anyway, thank you, T. You're great. Okay, enough shouting out. Let's get some questions. I believe there was a tweet question. Anna?
Yeah, it was from Jennifer Pryor. She says, hi from San Francisco, looking forward to tonight's webcast. Hi, Jennifer.
Hey, Jennifer.
But then she writes, new to the language poets, help me with the theme of enumerative constraint, 100 sentences, 5 words, 37 chapters, etc.
Okay.
Good question.
Yeah, who wants to take a stab at that? Emily Harnett, I don't know if you heard the question. We're getting a question from San Francisco from Jennifer. Is it Jennifer? Why do these poets go in for these seemingly arbitrary constraints? 100 sentences, Lynn Haginian, 38 years, 38 sentences. Any guess at that, Emily Harnett?
Yeah, just these constraints impose a certain form that allow poets to explore writing in different ways as a substitute for the more traditional forms that we generally don't really encounter in places like ModPo.
Aha, good answer. Erica, can you take a stab at this? Why seemingly arbitrary constraints? And the constraint of Albany, 100 sentences, each supposedly personal and political, it sounds arbitrary, but it also sounds kind of capacious at the same time. It almost doesn't sound limiting. Why do this?
Well, I think that because the constraints are constraints that the poets themselves built for themselves, it's more of the kind of constraint that's generative for the poet. So while it might seem arbitrary for us, that's the vessel that enables the work to happen.
Yeah. Yeah, and behind what you're saying, or maybe right on the top of it, but I misheard how much on the top it was, is the idea that these are forms. They're not throwing forms away, but they're creating forms, setting themselves a task, and then completing the task. And the Chapter 9.2 poets do this in a way because they set up their chance operations, and the Chapter 9.3 poets do it in a big way. Christian Buck, Eunoia. Does anybody want to just quickly describe as a preview to Chapter 9.3 what Eunoia does? Caroline?
In each chapter, he constrains himself to one vowel.
Right, so the Chapter A chapter uses words only with the vowel A, no other vowels.
Right.
That's quite a constraint. Lily, you want to take a stab at this really great question? Is it really freeing to pick your own form and then go with it?
Yeah, I mean, I would, as an exercise just to anyone, because I think a big part of language poetry is that, like, a poet doesn't have to be a big, celebrated genius person who, like, is has, like, a really high status. It can be, you can write about your daily life and can sort of be anyone telling your own autobiography or writing an autobiography collectively, whatever that can mean. So therefore, I think it's, fine to say to anyone, assign yourself 2 tasks. One, write a poem, and the other one, write a poem comprised of 100 sentences and see which one you write faster, or that comes more easily to your pen, I would say.
Yeah, and so Bernadette Mayer's experiments are going to be exactly what you described. And your comment implied that this was, you didn't say the word democratic, but it's a word worth using, right? The idea that Bernadette Mayer truly believes, she was in this room last year saying this on a ModPo webcast, if you create an experiment, you constrain yourself to do something, then you can do it. You really can do it. Am I pushing too far to say it's democratic?
No, I think it's pulling in what Emily said about traditional forms. Those traditional forms are could be construed as more elitist because they require knowing things like what a strophe in modern times, knowing what something like a strophe is, or like knowing how to count meter and whatever. It requires a certain type of education to know what that is. But to just say I'm going to write 100 sentences, or to say I'm 38 years old, I'm going to write one sentence for every year I was alive. Those are constraints that anyone can relate to and anyone can use and choose to adopt or not.
I want to turn to Molly. Molly, when we think about Ron Silliman's prose poem Bart, the constraint is not obvious in the writing, but this was a huge constraint. Do you want to take a minute to describe Bart as a constraint? Good luck.
Well, I think it functions on a couple of different levels. There are a couple constraints in Bart, one being that he's on the subway, so he's in a certain place. He's writing only while he is experiencing this train ride. Another one being the number of hours that he's on the train, which I think was 5.5 or something.
Right.
The idea that it was Labor Day could be a constraint in itself, because there's
he waited months for Labor Day and then he did it.
Right, there's a certain subset of people who are traveling on Labor Day, and so that gives him a special, flavor of experience that he couldn't have at any other time or place.
Yeah, thank you so much. We're going to take a question from the forums by Layla Hughes, and I'm going to ask Jason and Carlos, and then somebody whom Jason will put a mic in front of. Ooh, we've never done that quite. To respond to Layla. Layla is 13 years old, and she is, so that would be middle school, I guess.
Wait, what? She's 13?
Yeah, Layla Hughes is 13, yeah. She's homeschooled.
Wow.
I think she's homeschooled. Actually, at the end, did she? At the end, I'm going to shout out to Layla and say a little more about Layla. But yes, she is, and she's participating each week in the, is it the homeschool or the young people thread each week. So anyway, Layla writes, and this is a 28-year-old or a 55-year-old saying this it's kind of question that's very mature. She says, and Jason, you'll be the first crack at it, and then Carlos. Lately, I've been seeing a lot of posts about people not being able to connect with the poem in any way, shape, or form. Thus, a general question that it would be nice to hear a few handy thoughts on. What should you do when you don't connect with a poem? What is a good way to start heading towards understanding? And Jennifer Pryor from San Francisco, who's not only tweeting, but she's here in this thread, says, yes, I agree. I'm really struggling to connect with these language guys. Jason, this is a tough question. Can you give Layla and Jennifer, specifically in terms of the language poets, what do we do when we don't seem to connect to this? Some people accuse it of being cerebral. Some people accuse it of being unnecessarily disjunctive.
Well, it is disjunctive, but I think that putting together Jennifer's question and Layla's question helps to think about what the language poets are doing, what's happening in the course of one of their poems. And so we can think of, I think that Jennifer asked specifically about enumerative constraint. And one thing to think about is the way in which language itself is constrained and limited. I mean, the first thing I would do if you can't get a language poem is to put yourself back in second grade, or before that, kindergarten or nursery school, and try to just recite the alphabet. And how many letters are there? There are, how many? 26. Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Al.
Well, you were putting yourself back there, so.
Sure, I forgot. I was going to say 24.
There's some we don't need.
But as well, there are constraints in life. How many words will you speak in your life is a constraint, or what will you hear next is something you can't predict. So I think that trying to think about language itself as this very limited material that our communication is mostly constrained to think about the way a particular poem is pausing or is moving from statement to statement in a way that is as unpredictable as the language we use in our life, rather than the idea that a normal printed page of text gives us, that language is a clear and consistent and predictable linear thing.
Wow. What you said, aside from being characteristically brilliant, is something we're going to learn more and more as we go to the subsequent parts of Chapter 9, which is to say, more and more these works are more like the way the world is, or the way life is, ambient language. Language is just out there, and less like the predictable the sonnet, for instance, which is not at all like life, right? So, yeah, that's one way to do it. I don't know if Layla is clicking her heels over that, because I think she was that answer, which I loved, because here she is asking about she wants to connect. And frankly, Layla, and we're going to turn to Carlos, and while I'm turning to Carlos, I want you to pick someone randomly who seems like they can answer this question. Whoa, I can't wait to see who you pick. Yes, I forgot what I was going to say. Carlos, how would you answer? Oh, I know. The choices that I made originally 4 years ago when we created the ModPo syllabus were choices in favor of poems that I thought people could connect to, as opposed to many language poets' poems that wouldn't seem to be that immediately. For instance, Chronic Meanings, which once you learn that it's an elegy or pre-elegy, and you get the constraint, which is he's going to stop himself after 5 words, then, I mean, I once asked Bob Froman whether this was kind of a trick. He didn't like that term, but it's sort of something you can only do once. The idea of cutting off a line to be commensurate with the cutting off of life. That's something you should be able to connect to, as opposed to other language poets where you can't. My Life by Lyndon Ginian has this fabulous memoiristic mode about it. And there are recognizably things about this American girlhood in there, and Ron Silliman's Albany too. So we tried to create, and Charles Bernstein's poem is a post 9/11 poem, so there is that hook. So in a way, these are kind of easy, Layla, relatively easy. So I tried to make it so that we could connect, but if you don't, we need to deal with that. Carlos, how do you deal with it?
So I'm not sure if I'm going to directly answer her question, but one of the themes I find in these language poets is this idea of the self, the person, the poet, and the poem as a host of narratives. And so, you know, in a life, there
a host
are
of narratives.
A host of
Carlos.
narratives. So, you know, you have moments or memories or experiences that kind of collage themselves over the course of a life, or you as a person sort of go through changes throughout your life. And I feel like these poems, especially I'm thinking of Albany, but also with My Life and these other pieces, I think attempt to instead of follow a linear narrative,
Mhm.
like we've been touching on, they try to
Yeah.
be more realistic in that they mirror this sense of a host of
Right.
narratives.
And the key here is that it's more realistic. We're saying it's more realistic, but it feels to a novice reader like it's less realistic, and I think that's the sticking point. Who has the microphone? I want you to finish. Oh, absolutely. John Womack from Michigan gets the
Michigan.
mic. Carlos wants to finish first, John.
No, so I mean, I might say my advice would be to, like with any poem, just take time with it, step back from it,
Mhm.
and maybe focus less on trying to find a linear narrative and just, you know, not even taking it line by line, but kind of zooming out, looking at the big picture of the poem.
Good. So, John Womack, how do you want to deal with that question? Did you volunteer for this, or did Jason just give it to you?
He
Okay.
picked me.
Okay.
I would advise her to maybe look at these poets and how they have set constraints on what they were doing, whether it be so many words, or if they're just going to run it together into what looks like a prose, and maybe try to do it with your own life. Set a constraint for yourself. Say, okay, I'm going to write only 5 words or 7 words and 30 sentences, and do it, and put it in terms of your own life. At 13 years old, for me, that's going back many moons. I look at these poets. The one that wrote at 37 was when she wrote it. I'm not sure how old Ron Silliman is, but much more world experience and things to write about.
Yeah.
So a lot of the things he writes about are coming from his life, from a slice of his history.
Yeah.
So if she were to maybe set a constraint for herself like they have done, and then write it from her own experience, she may, understand a little better.
Really cool. John Womack. Once again, some snaps for John Womack. I want to put out the number. I want to test Allie's snapping. I want to test Allie's mic in a second. 215-573-9752. 215-573-9752. Please call us. Allie, can we test your mic? No, we don't have Allie. Do you want to try to reconnect? Zach, do we have a suggestion for Allie? Chris? Make sure your mic is unmuted, etc. There's Max.
Hey, look at that.
Hello, Max.
Hi, Al.
Hey, can you travel to New York and fix Allie's microphone, please?
Yeah, sure. Let me get in a high-speed train.
Good evening, Max. So I want to play just a second or two, or 10 seconds or so, from Lynn Haginian's reading of the section of my life when she's 4 to 5 years old, because something that Jason said made me think that Lynn Haginian is the right way to approach this problem. So here it is, and I'm going to ask Caroline and Emily just to respond in any way you want to this question of how we would read my life, which is a text I think a lot of people use in freshman college classes, really as an alternative memoir, alternative autobiography. How would this work? How could Layla and others get into it? So here's Lynn Haginian, and this is quite early. This is actually before the book was published, so it's a very young Lynn Haginian.
What is the meaning hung from that depend? A dog bark, the engine of a truck, an airplane hidden by the trees and rooftops. My mother's childhood seemed a kind of holy melodrama. She ate her pudding in a pattern, carving a rim around the circumference of the pudding, working her way inward toward the center, scooping with the spoon to see how far she could separate the pudding from the edge of the bowl before the center collapsed, spreading the pudding out again, lower, back to the edge of the bowl. You could tell that it was improvisational because at that point they closed their eyes.
I like that. Caroline, that last 2 sentences, you've got the text. One of them was this elaborate sentence, maybe even 2, about the child playing with her pudding. And the other one could have been, you could think it refers back to the pudding thing, but it actually doesn't because it's disjunct. Any thoughts about that? And then we'll go to Emily.
I have to be honest, this is a text we were talking about in the Philly meetup upstairs that I definitely struggle with.
Good. Well, why don't we start with Emily?
Yeah.
And we'll go from there. Emily, what do you think? What do you think about Lynn Haginian? How do you read it? What did you hear?
Yeah, well, you were breaking up and freezing a little bit while that was happening, Al.
Oh.
But in the sentences that we read, at least, those were pretty coherent, straightforward, not super language poetry-y sentences. What makes that book an experimental piece of autobiography is something that happens on the formal level, on a level larger than the sentence.
Yes, it happens between the sentences.
Exactly, yeah. So starting with the things that are easily identified with, these kind of beautiful sentences about her mother's childhood as a holy melodrama, and using those as an inroad into the larger, more difficult experimental framework of that novel,
Yeah.
I think is the way to approach this.
Yeah. So Caroline, can you summarize what's difficult about my life for you?
It's difficult for me because I recognize that there's a disjunctive. I recognize the language poetry principles that created it.
Mm-hmm.
But as I'm reading it, I often read through the disjunctive parts and create this kind of more domestic, warm narrative from it.
Yeah.
But I want to resist that impulse
Right.
because I don't want to create her into this domestic female poet and not let her have a more experimental side.
You did it. I mean, just by asking that question, you did it. So there's a tension there. Lily, maybe you'll speak to this, and Erica Kaufman, maybe you'll speak to this as well. I assume you heard what Caroline said. You did it. You co-created. You fell into the trap that we all fall in, and that Lynn Haginian would be the first to admit that she falls into, in thinking back to her life when she's between 4 and 5 years old. She creates a disjuncture based on a lack of cause and effect and an out-of-order sequencing. But she invites you, those, including you, who have had an American girlhood and who know something about it and might fall into the narrative and socialized patterns of it. And then she's also inviting you to sort of guess or figure out for yourself and therefore co-create the meaning by figuring out how the juxtapositions work. You nailed it. You nailed it by asking questions. Lily, you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think that exactly that. I mean, I agree with what Al said, but also picking up on what you said about like the domesticity and maybe the particularly gendered aspects of the narrative. I feel like she wants us to be anxious about this exact thing that you're anxious about, which I think is right. Is like, in some way, she's trying to recreate or look at differently all of those narratives. And if we don't have those in the back of our head, like say, I would be interested to know if someone reading this from a completely different background like would have a hard time getting what Haginian's actually saying in the piece, because I think it's important to understand that like slightly pre-war and then post-war girlhood identity, because that's what she's kind of critiquing. So if you have that in the back of your head and then you can compare it to what disjunctiveness she's creating, that's helpful more than a hindrance, I think.
Erica Kaufman, do you want to add something to this discussion of my life?
I would echo everything that Bruce just said, and also point to, perhaps as like a further support, the reference to Dorothy Wordsworth, and also the moment where Haginian says, or the writer is saying, speaker, that language is restless. So I think that it is asking you to think about and participate / interrogate a very specific kind of moment.
Yeah.
It may not be familiar to the reader, but it is an experience, and it is a gendered experience.
Yeah, and I think one of the brilliant things about this book is that she is critiquing social convention, or the way that girls and women are socialized, which has everything to do with the chronological arrangement of the phases of one's life. And she is, I wouldn't say busting it apart, but she is interrogating it constantly. And it's just, that is just such at the time she did it, a remarkably new approach to that whole problem, which is essentially a post-war and Cold War U.S. problem of how the girlhood would be narrated. And so even when she's sipping Shirley Temples and wearing her Mary Janes, so she's taking some pride in filling out the conventions of the American girlhood. She's surrounding that sentence by things that are uniquely different. We have someone on the phone, Anna Strong. Who is it?
We do. We have Chris calling from LA with a question about why I'm not a painter.
That's great.
Yeah.
So, Chris, how are you?
I'm doing well, Alice. Chris Foreman.
Chris Foreman.
Yeah.
Hey, it's been a little while since I've been in touch with you.
It has been a while, but I've been keeping up and still very much enjoying the course.
That's fantastic. So you wanted to talk about what?
I wanted to talk about why I am not a painter, and I have a particular question.
Okay, go for it.
All right. So I really enjoy the poem. I think I have a pretty good idea what's going on, but I'm flummoxed by one aspect of it.
Uh-oh. If you're flummoxed, Chris Foreman, I'm in trouble because you seem like the kind of guy who's not flummoxed very often.
Well, it's an odd state to be in, but one I'm learning from your course that is not a bad state to be in.
It is not a bad thing. Well, you turned that around really well. Chris, before you ask your question, I want Jason to give the mic to Mary. Mary, are you up to speed on that O'Hara poem? Okay, good. You better be because you're doing a lot of peer reviewing. Okay, Chris, fire away.
Okay, so in the third stanza, the speaker reports that he's started writing, and pretty soon what he's got is a whole page of words, not lines.
Yeah.
And then below he says, it's even in prose, I am a real poet.
Oh, boy.
So,
you picked
taking
the hardest part of the poem.
Yeah, so taking that second statement, it could just be parataxis. He could just be saying, it's in prose, and I'm a real poet. But it seems like the second phrase follows from the first in some sense. It's even in prose, therefore I'm a real poet. And I don't get that.
Mary, do you get it?
That was a difficult part of the poem for me as well. And the way I made sense of it was his wit, was John O'Hara being witty. And I think that there is a lot of wit in the poems of that school. And so there's sort of like a self-depreciating remark.
You are so good. No, I would have answered the question in a sassy kind of way, like he's just bullshitting there. But you said something more profound, which is that there's a lot of wit in this poem, and so wit and whimsy. That's an answer. We have Dave Poplar who's joined us. Hello, Dave. How are you?
Great. How's it going?
Good. Did you hear the question?
No, I came in sort
Okay.
of
All right, you're off the hook on this. Allie, do we have sound for you? Allie Castleman? I think it's a frozen Allie. Okay, so let's go to Max on this. Max, did you hear the question from Chris Foreman?
About the poem being in prose?
About why I'm not a painter, and he asked about the line, pretty soon it is a whole page of words, not lines, then another page. There should be so much more, not of orange. Where's the stuff about the prose poem?
Beginning of the third stanza.
Third stanza, sorry.
Soon I have a whole page of words.
And down
it is
below,
even
Al.
in prose, I am a real poet. Right. Max, what are we going to do with this prose and poetry and words and lines and pages?
Well, the point he wants to make there is that the poetry kind of contains all the other media and forms, right? So it's the provocation that the poem, writing in prose, that makes him a real poet. It also he's also painting, which also makes him a poet, right? So poetry can contain all of these other forms, and it can kind of accrue them too, in a way. That's why he has so many lines. He tries to paint a poem and lines up much bigger than he ever thought it would be. Great prose in a poem too.
Max, we heard most of what you say, but your microphone is swallowing the sound of your voice a little bit.
Weird.
Yeah.
This is a brand new camera too. It should be working just fine.
I think if you spoke very slowly, we heard it. If you speak very slowly, I think we're going to get it.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, you're great now. Can you hear me now?
Yeah. everybody just fine. I was saying that the point he's making is that poetry can contain all the other forms and all the other modes.
Yes.
That's provocation
Yes.
in that line. It's even in prose. I'm a real poet.
Chris Foreman, it's even in prose, I'm a real poet. He's whimsically flying in the face of expectations. Isn't that satisfying enough for you?
That is pretty satisfying, actually.
Okay.
And when I look at the poems we're reading this week, they look a lot like prose.
Yes. Yeah, I like the way you're moving forward from the poem from last week about which we were writing essays to this week's. You're a dutiful ModPoer focusing during the webcast on this week's poems. And you're right that, even though the language poets didn't get a lot from this end, from the I do this, I do that end of the New York School, I think they got more than they realized. And so would you say something about the prose of the Chapter 9.1 poets? Ron Silliman, writing in prose. Lynn Haginian, writing in prose.
Yeah, well, I read at lunch today Bart after listening to it first. And I got a lot out of the listening, but I think maybe even more out of the reading of it. And just very much agreed with what I then heard in some of the video discussion is, again, form is enacting content. There's a forward movement to it, and kind of the prose and the movement allows the mixing of what he sees, what he remembers, what he's thinking about, what that suggests.
Right.
And it really worked for me. I liked it very much.
Yeah. Dave Poplar, can you take a minute to get ready to say something about Bart? But I'm going to tee it up for you. Okay. It seems to me that the language poets liked prose poetry because they really wanted to focus on poetics, on ideas about what a poem is, and less being less sort of compelled by the whole problem of lineation and meter. Bob Perlman, in the poem we're reading by him, and typically Bob is not a prose poet, he is interested in lineation, 5 words, new line. But Bart is really, as Chris Foreman was just suggesting, Bart really is a kind of record of a quotidian experience, and prose seems to be the form that's appropriate for that. Dave Poplar, say anything at all about Bart.
It's interesting too. It's all, there's no full stop. There's no periods in it. It's all.
It's one sentence.
Commas. Yeah. So it's perfect for sort of a filtering in and out between thoughts in your head and physical reality. It's really challenging what a poem can do. And when you take all these different lines out of context, each one can mean something completely different. And for example, the line I like most in Bart is when he just says, as sort of a throwaway, means I'll spend 75 cents. Okay, pay more attention. And I think that's so meta. Okay, pay more attention. Because I think that's what he's doing on the train. I think that's what this is forcing us to do by paying attention to every little tiny detail of this, like you said, quotidian experience. I just love being able to pick all these little tiny throwaway things out and find so much meaning in them.
And then there's also, Chris, there's also an issue here of the language poets kind of tired of being marginalized into the world of verse. And I think they're not that aggressive about this as I'm going to make them sound, but I think they wanted to move into the realm of prose. Certainly the idea that Lynn Haginian is writing an alternative memoir in prose suggests that she's competing with a whole stack of very popular memoiristic prose books. So she's gonna play in that arena, which is really a competitive arena for readership. Chris Foreman, you said that at lunch you were reading Bart.
Yes.
How many people, I don't know where you work, but how many people were reading poetry like that around you?
I think I was the only one out.
That was kind of a silly way of asking you this. You're really into this poetry, and what effect is it having on you? Are you having trouble concentrating on the mundanities of life?
Well, I'm in a fortunate position where I'm able to spend a fair amount of time on it, and so it's sort of integrated into my day. I think I mentioned when we met that I take in a lot of it through the iPhone, so even when I'm driving, I'm able to listen to the lectures rather than, or not the lectures, but the discussions rather than watch them.
Right.
And I think just that this approach to poetry is translatable. I've been telling people I work with just to life, is just looking for the openness and the indeterminacy without driving to the answer or reading only for content.
Yeah.
So I'm getting a lot out of it.
Well, I really appreciate that. Can you give us before you go, can you give us an instance of a poem that has had that kind of effect on you?
Yes. I really like Sid Corman's poem.
Mm-hmm. And what effect did it have? You were just talking about a kind of undecidability and an openness.
Yeah, well, it's about connecting, and it's about how to connect with others and what's necessary for connection.
You would say, I think, Chris, that we could lead a life, we could lead our lives deriving from these modes. What kind of life would that be? Could we? You know, that's an easy academic utopian statement to be made by a guy like me. But could we live a life based on the ideas and modes that we find here?
I think it's not the life that we are socialized into. As children in school, we're rewarded for the right answer all the way through university and then even in normal work life. So it would be countercultural in a sense to sort of have the openness that these poems suggest as a possibility. But despite that, I would say yes, it would be possible to live that sort of life.
Thank you, Chris, for calling. You're a good person, and we really appreciate you staying with the course, and I'm sure we'll see you in the forums.
Al, I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That's Chris Foreman from Los Angeles. Erica and Caroline, who've been thinking most of all about teaching, before we switch on to a new topic, you heard what Chris Foreman said. He's not in education. He's not a teacher. As far as I know, he's a business person and a philanthropist and so forth. But, you know, he said the way we're socialized, I assume he meant educated, this all is kind of difficult. Erica, you're a educational reformist. What can be done? What are some of the things that can be done in educating, in schooling, that would more closely align or make this counter-socialization possible? That's a wide open question for you. I know you want to talk about this topic.
That's a huge question. Well, I think that a lot of it has to do with taking risks in the classroom, which is hard for teachers who are constrained by the various Common Core standards, etc. But I think that one of the biggest, most exciting things that I see when I'm working with teachers in classrooms is bringing in poets and poems like this as a way to get students excited about language and thinking about using language in ways that they haven't ever thought about using language before.
Great answer. Caroline, I'm going to turn that question to you. But first, I want to ask Jason to get ready to carry the mic to everyone in the audience. And I'll be in a minute asking each of you to tell us, and you can pass if you're not up to speed on Chapter 9.1, right? So you can pass. But if you have been familiar with some or all of the 9.1 poems, all I want you to do is tell us which poem you connected to most readily or most powerfully, and very briefly, why. So each one of you is going to get a chance to do that. And we are going to go to that phone call, right? Did we get a phone call? Okay, good. Caroline, what do you think about this education question?
So for me, with these poets and thinking about this educational question, the line that always sticks with me from actually my life is, isn't the avant-garde always pedagogical? And Alan Golding has an essay with this title.
Yes.
And I like to take these methods, a lot of these poets use these constraints and use them, and Charles Bernstein uses this in his pedagogy, and kind of use them as ways for students to read poetry that maybe isn't avant-garde, or read novels, and to learn how to bend and shape form in unexpected ways that they're taught and socialized not to touch or play with literature. So I feel like even if they're not having this content or these poets in their classroom, they can be taught to use the techniques of these poets to learn about literature.
Yeah.
So I would definitely put a plug in to look at Bernadette Mayer's writing experience, and also look at the reading experiments, WREADING.
Reading, yes.
Reading experiments as ways that you can read poetry or literature and learn about form.
WREADING, reading. And so reading in that sense, I think this is Bernstein's word.
Right.
Reading becomes a combination of reading and also writing.
Right.
And I also hear in that making, like kind of a kneading.
Right.
And I think there is a movement in higher education that instead of simply learning things, from, you learn literature, the thing to do is to do more making.
Right. So you respond, instead of having students like just write blogs, little discussion responses, or just kind of basically repeating what I say in lecture, I have them respond by making something that would deal with the form of what we're talking about, like Melville.
Yes.
So write in the style of Melville, or deform Melville,
Yes.
make Melville talk back to Poe in Poe style, or something like that. And that helps them learn in a more radical way. And a lot of this doesn't come out of something I've learned in pedagogy. It comes out of what I've learned from these poets.
Yeah. This is a hot topic.
Al, can I jump in for 1 second?
Yes, please.
I would also just add to everything Caroline says that Charles Bernstein also has writing experiments too. So he has the reading experiments and the writing experiments, and the writing experiments are kind of like a companion to the Bernadette Mayer.
Yeah.
And he has an essay on exactly this kind of pedagogical thing in his book, Attack of the Difficult Poems.
Yes, Attack of the Difficult Poems. Two comments from me about this, because this is a topic that's dear to my heart. So many people, since we started ModPo in 2012, I have encountered so many people around the world who were turned off by poetry because of the well-intentioned but basically failed way in which it was taught to them. With all the best intentions, all the great poems, and there was a certain delivery mechanism. Here's a great poem, I deliver it unto you, and you will maybe recite it, or you will learn it, and you will learn how to scan it and understand the metricality of it. And so many young people, then they went in a different direction, and years later they encounter, for instance, this course or some other reading group, and they realize, it wasn't taught to me in a way that made me feel like I could be a co-creator. Now that's the first thing I want to say. The other is about classrooms. So many classrooms, and alas, too often my own, are so set up to move through the hour or the hour and 20 minutes in a perfectly predictable fashion, with the goals stated from the beginning and the outcomes predicted in the curriculum plan made in September, but now it's November. And if you're teaching a poem that goes and wanders and digresses and knows that the efficient way is always the longest way, and you're in a classroom in which you're driving home in a very direct narrative way, there's no way that Heginian or Bernadette Mayer or almost any of these poets we've been reading lately has a chance against that A to Z-ness, that narrativity of the classroom. And so it's very hard for teachers to let go and allow the class to wander, particularly if evaluators and superintendents are looking in on the classroom and wondering why the hell this thing is digressing. We are really up against it, folks. It's a very difficult thing. Well, so let's take the call, and then we're going to do our little survey of poems we connect to. You're smiling. Who is it?
It's a buddy. It's our buddy Mama Pope. She's calling about Bart.
Mama Pope calling about Bart. And, Joyce, You are not far from Bart. How often have you been on the Bart lately?
I live a little bit farther now, but what I wanted to talk about, Bart, was the amazement of this poem, because it was relatable to me where I lived in the 1970s. When Bart was being first built, there was an excitement when I first heard the train. They were testing the trains, and they whizzed by my house like maybe 2 blocks away. And I had the good fortune of being on the train, headed to Berkeley. I've been to Walnut Creek, Concord. That whole area is my home. Pleasant Hill is my home. I live there, and I sat on that BART train so grateful that I could take my babies to the doctors, to the dentist. I didn't have to drive. I had to keep my eye on my babies, and I just could live in all of his descriptions.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to share that with you.
That's so
it.
cool. And we of course make a recording of this, so we'll play that for Ron, and he'll be very happy, especially if I give him one of my meatballs.
Yeah. Yes, that'll be coming soon. Allie Katz is working with me on that, so we've almost got it
You are
solved.
too much. She's referring to our program coordinator at the Writer's House. It's coming FedEx, or I'm so excited about it. I didn't go shopping this week, Joyce, so I'm going to be
God, I better get out there and get it in the mail.
Thank you. Love
All
you
right,
so
and
much.
thank you.
Thanks for
And
calling.
love you all very much.
All
Bye-bye.
right. Just a couple of tweets, and then we're going to have Jason pass the mic around. Therese Pope, daughter of the aforementioned Joyce, writes, my favorite line in Albany, if the function of writing is to express the world. Ray Maxwell says, trouble concentrating on the mundanities of life. Love it. T, in the Philippines, I feel that sitting in the spaces between the lines of Haginian's My Life allows me to weave my own life to this piece. Boy, T's really good at this, isn't she? Mark Snyder, do me a favor, please. Would you please sing Happy Birthday to my daughter and future ModPo Peep, Haley? All right, Mark, I'm gonna do it really fast to Haley. She's a future ModPo Peep. Should be a present one. Anybody want to join me? And we're gonna do it fast for Haley. Okay. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Haley, future ModPo Peep. Happy birthday to you. 13 years old. Oh, Mark Snyder, you've been a dad to Haley for 13 years. And T says, and this is the last I'll quote, oh, hey, I have more cards to send you guys. Just need to figure it out. Thanks, Al. And the one she wants to send, she takes a picture of it. It's a quote from me. Here's the small gasp. We're lost in a poem, and that loss is thrilling. Obviously a reference to Ray Armantrout. Okay, who's got the mic? The poem you connected to, John.
The poem I connected to the most was In a Restless World Like This Is.
Yeah,
and
Charles Bernstein.
Right, and I think what I found that I'm most connected to in it is, even if you account for the subject matter being 9/11, there's a sense of play in the poem and in all the language poets' work, really, that I think is essential and allows you to enter into it yourself. As Al says, be a co-creator. And I find that these poems resist close reading, but I enjoy the cloud, the kind of nested concepts you can attach to through the poem and see the different threads. And it's his play with the sonnet form, really, and his repulsion from it and his attraction to it, really I found interesting.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you, John. We're going to go to Mary for another one, and then to Dave Bender, and then we'll take a pause and get the phone call.
Because she's new to me this year, I might not get the name right. It's Harriet
Mullen.
Harriet Mullen.
Yep.
I really loved Sleeping with the Dictionary because it's something that I used to do as a child, was play with the dictionary and play lots of games and close my eyes and flip through the dictionary. Mm-hmm. So that's the one that to me really stood out, although I love a lot of them this time.
Yeah, that's really a great poem. And for those of you who are ModPo veterans, those are two new poems. Sleeping with the Dictionary is a prose poem. And then this remarkable poem, Annie Lit, which really could have been in 9.3 or 9.2. What she does there is she takes a you word and then a me word. So it's you, me, right? You are a ukulele beyond my microphone. You are a Yukon beyond my Micronesia. But the one you were referring to is this incredibly playful sense of the kind of sexual dynamics of a woman and her words, right? And having the dictionary and sort of allowing the dictionary to sort of infiltrate her sense of the language and then vice versa. So it's quite, in the dark nights, insomnia, the book is a stimulating sedative. That's, wow, that's what sleeping with a dictionary would be, right? Awakening my tired imagination to the hypnagogic trance of language. Great, thank you. Dave Bender, favorite poem this week and the one you connected with, and why?
So far, Albany. Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Because I not only do I relate, I understand most of the references, but I really liked the way that it was very honest, I felt, and that you could really understand and relate to how there is a political connection to our own personal lives.
Yes.
In a way that he shows that I never really realized before.
Yeah. Yeah, really well put. The cops wear shields that serve as masks, her lungs heavy with asbestos. 2 weeks too old to collect orphans' benefits. A woman on the train asks Angela Davis for an autograph. You get to read your Miranda. I mean, that's just really good, where the pronouns are all mixed up, except that not in an Ashberian way, because he wrote it in order. What Silliman is doing is he's essentially either writing it in a scramble or then literally scrambling things. So that all that mixing of pronouns creates, as Dave was suggesting, a larger landscape of political and personal issues. So it's not just one story. It's great. All right, thank you, all three of you. That was terrific. We'll come back to some more. And Anna Strong, who do we have on the phone?
We have our friend John Knight calling.
John Knight from Washington, or from the Washington area, maybe Annapolis. John, am I right? Are you in Annapolis?
No, I'm in D.C.
You're in D.C. And John, can you speak up nice and loud, because Chris Martin's doing some crazy things to get your voice loud?
I'll speak as loud as I can.
That's perfect. John, I forgot to give the book away to the second caller, so if you don't already own a copy of Julia Block's Letters to Kelly Clarkson, we'd like to give this to you as a gift from your ModPo friends.
I'd love it.
Fantastic. Okay, so at some point Anna will get your address, although we probably have it already. So John, what do you want to say? What do you want to tell us?
Well, I'm interested in the poem Why I'm Not a Painter.
Okay.
I see it as an identity poem. My thought is that here's this person who is not sure that he's a poet or a painter, but he's also a very famous gay leader in the gay community. And if he were to question his gayness, he couldn't really talk that out straight. So I'm saying that he's telling people bent that, I don't know, I'm not quite happy what my orientation is.
Wow. John, will you, what we're going to do is stay on the line, but Chris is going to take the sound down a little bit for a minute, because we're getting quite a buzz. Can you do that, Chris? Fantastic. Okay. I'm going to ask Molly and Max and Dave to take a crack at this. Now, you know John Knight, he tends to call once or twice a year, and he gives us a whole new interpretation. Does anybody remember? He did this with the William Carlos Williams, Beyond Walls. Crazy stuff. This is not quite as out there. Anybody want to respond to that? Molly first, did you hear his interpretation, and what do you think?
I did, but I need a minute to process. Can you come back to me?
Yes, absolutely. Well, let's go to Dave Poplar.
Yeah, it's not the interpretation that I got from it, but I guess I need to read it a few more times to have it sink in and see where it comes from. But
well, John is suggesting that there's a kind of swerve from a topic, an identity topic, that John Knight says that O'Hara wasn't quite ready to talk about. And so the question is not being a painter a stand-in for another kind of not identity?
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that.
Okay, Max. John Knight is stumping us again. Max McKenna, you want to try that?
It's a good interpretation, but I would say no.
Okay. John Knight, Max McKenna 1, John Knight 0. Jason, however, has a way of making it all work out.
Yeah, I think that the way that I respond to John's interpretation is to remember that it's an interpretation and not a solution, and that a poem can have an array of interpretations, and the more interpretations that it has, the more notes that it is striking, the more musically complex it becomes. So one could say that it could be that O'Hara's gayness can think about what people pay attention to, or where our attention lands. And if there is a question of identity, it might not be that being a poet is a stand-in for being gay, but noticing one's identity as a poet and being different from the painters might have extra resonance for him. Mm. So it's in play, but I wouldn't say that this poem is an allegory in which one thing is directly standing for another, right. But that we have that certainly that interpretation definitely enriches the poem for me in thinking about it.
Yeah.
But it doesn't. But we have to always be really careful. And what we're taught in elementary school and through high school is that we treat a poem like a puzzle, and it's a puzzle with an answer. And I think one of the most important lessons that we're trying to teach is to pause before you have a final answer and find more answers.
Yeah. Yes, well put. And let's bring John Knight back up, Chris. And of course, John, who is more of a interpretive provocateur than an answer provider, gives these interpretations in that spirit. John, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. I made my submission entitled UG to the essay. One of the points that I made was that he compared himself to a painter, but he compared himself to a straight painter. He had many gay painter friends.
Yeah.
So that would kind of add to the thing. And the other part of it, my other thought is that I see possibly the interpretations as being layered. In other words,
yes,
a very fundamental, unprocessed conflict could be lower than the higher when you get to the meta interpretation of the poem.
No, I get it. John, what is the title of your essay?
UG.
UG.
Right, it relates to HD.
Okay, UG. So, thanks, John. Thanks for calling. And are you going to come for the final words again this year?
I hope to.
Okay, we'll see you, in a couple of weeks.
Ray and Anthony.
Fantastic. Okay. Thanks, John. Thanks for calling. So I think everybody should go to John's essay and have a conversation there in the forums. So what I think I want to do is I want to ask a couple of more people about their favorite poems, but then I want to have everybody, including the audience, do final words. And your final words this time, if you're TAs, your final words can be something that people should look forward to, either this for the rest of this week or the next couple of weeks. And yeah. And or just a state of where you are in ModPo, how you're dealing with it, what you're getting from it, just a little ModPo generalization. I ask everybody to do that. So Jason, let's have a couple of people do their favorite poems again. So what do you say? Should we have maybe Janice and Nelson?
Yes.
No, they're going to pass? Okay, Janice is going to pass, but Nelson has one.
I thought we're on, yes.
Yes.
I like the bit about why I'm not a painter. At the end, though, I took the meaning that he was thinking that a painter has to come in and scope his work out before he starts. He buys a piece of canvas only so big, he makes cartoons, he's going to do what he wants with it. He, however, can sit down, put the paper in his typewriter and go and go and go and go and go until he's done. And he feels more comfortable that way than he would be in some pre-confined area, which goes against what you were saying earlier about how being confined can actually help creativity.
Yeah.
I don't know.
And it's a different spatial arrangement. Yes, Janice.
Well, I'm behind. I'm like on week 3 or 4, but I'm really enjoying it. But I have a general question.
Yes.
And that is, what makes a good poem? Why are these poems better than poems you see in the New Yorker?
Okay. Erica Kaufman. Janice's question is, why... Janice, great 11th hour question. We're wrapping up, and Janice comes out with the,
guys, we have a 3-hour webcast tonight.
What is the nature of the universe? Erica, no, don't apologize. Erica, the real zinger was at the end when she said, why are these poems better than the ones we might find in the New Yorker? Because, frankly, John Ashbery's in the New Yorker. I think Eileen Miles has been in the New Yorker, maybe. Ray Armentrout is in New York. That fits. But, generally none of the poets that we're studying have ever been in the New Yorker. So, Erica Kaufman, what's going on at the New Yorker? Yeah. I mean, Janice's sincere question was, why these? Why these poems?
It's funny, part of the reason why I'm hesitating is because I was just visiting with my parents, and my dad is in our line of work, and asked me how come your poems have never been in the New Yorker?
You mean his daughter's poems, your own poems?
Yeah, me. He asked me why my poems have never been in the New Yorker, and we had this long conversation where I was like, I sort of don't really want my poems to be in the New Yorker, which then led me to think a lot about many of the people that we're reading this week and how, and this isn't to say anything bad about any of the ModPo writers who have been in the New Yorker, but I think that there is, there's a kind of ease of reading that comes with a New Yorker poem, or at least like the mask of that. Like you think that a poem is really digestible and easy to read, so then it appears in the New Yorker. But the thing that I love the most about the kind of poems that we talk about is that they ask you to reinvent your ways of thinking about poetry and your ways of thinking about reading.
Yeah,
so that would be, and sometimes that's really hard and it's not particularly pleasant, but if you stick to it, it becomes pleasant.
Janice, it's such a basic question about why ModPo exists. I mean, if ModPo were, if this massive open online course were delivering poems that were really easily available, forget about accessible for a minute, just available, it would be, I would say, almost not worth doing. I mean, one of the things that I take pleasure in is, creating some exposure for a poem like Bart, which is actually, Silliman's a very well-known poet, but Bart is not read much. He never performed it until we had him record it. Niedecker is a very, very important poet now, but it took a lot of work to get her to be read. And the Niedecker poems, almost every Niedecker poem you encounter is just stunning. And of course, we know about Dickinson's reception in her time. The New Yorker of her day would never have published her, or if they did, I guess she was published in Harper's, I want to say, or Atlantic, but they messed up the poem by imposing all kinds of editorial normalities upon it. And so I guess, part of this is to try to create a coherent story that's a parallel story to more mainstream writing. But it's so much more complicated than that. But thanks for the question. Okay, so we're going to have final words now. And the final words can either be, how ModPo is going for you, or something that people should look forward to in the next couple of weeks. So let's start with Dave Poplar. Any final word, Dave? Or cheerleading for people?
Overhearing by Ray Armantrout. I just wanted to give that poem some props. I think that's such a great poem. It's got so many layers in it, and it's so interesting for so many reasons. It's, one dream being influenced by another dream. And I think we can actually read this as sort of a language poet's version of the instruction manual, because we're talking about a dream influencing another dream. So then, when does what we read get mapped onto us? It's as if it exhibits an interactive participation in the poem, and that's really what we're doing when we're reading the poem, what we're doing when we read all these poems. So I just wanted to give that poem a shout out.
And it's in ModPo Plus. It's called Overhearing by Ray Armantrout. Thank you, Dave. Erica Kaufman, final thought, final word.
I'm excited for next week. I love Chance.
Yeah, 9.2, Chance. Can you say just another word about it? What do you mean by chance?
I am always very, very excited to talk about John Cage and Joan Rutalic, and to take the idea that we began with about the constraint-based writing to a very different level.
Yeah, great. That's 9.2, aleatory poetry, chance-based poetry. Fantastic. Max McKenna?
Just want to let people know that conceptualism is coming up, and it's pretty controversial. Speaking of the New Yorker, Kenny Goldsmith actually was in the New Yorker very recently, and it was this huge controversy. So,
Not his poetry, though. His an article about him.
which is almost probably
Better.
gained more attention than his poetry would have.
Or anybody's poetry in the New Yorker, yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, it wouldn't put it there; it wouldn't make sense. But I mean, it probably got more attention. So that's a fun one to look out for. Also, check out the collaborative close readings I recorded 10 days ago at the library in downtown Chicago with a bunch of Chicago people. It's O'Hara and Ashbury. For those of you who haven't heard them yet, give them a listen and let me know what you think in my office hour.
Fantastic. Thank you, Max. And all you have to do is go to the left side of any ModPo page and click on crowdsourced close readings, and you'll see there a syllabus, another syllabus of ModPo following the weeks, and you'll see in the appropriate sections recordings of Max and his crew in Chicago. Molly O'Neill, final thought.
Yeah, I will echo Dave's plug for Overhearing and for all of ModPo Plus. I feel like we spent a lot of time on O'Hara tonight, and we kind of shortchanged our early language poets a little bit. So just encourage everybody to go in and explore the emotional and political ramifications of this week's work.
Great. Terrific. Good plug. Thank you. Carlos, final thought?
Yeah, I would plug a different poet. I can't remember if she's coming up or we've already passed her, but we've talked about her language experiments, Mrs. Bernadette Mayer.
Mm-hmm.
And she's one of my favorite poets. So.
And we're going to get that in the Conceptualism Unoriginality chapter 9.3 in the 10th week.
There we go.
Yep. Fantastic. Thank you, Carlos. Caroline, final thought?
Final thought. I'm going to say how ModPo is going for me so far,
Yeah.
and I just wish that we had more time.
Oh.
I'm really enjoying meeting everyone at the meetups and putting faces to everyone's names on the forum, so that's been really wonderful.
Fantastic. Thank you, Caroline. Lily Applebaum.
Yeah, I guess Ray Armantrout is one of my favorite poets to read in my free time, as opposed to reading poetry for my work time, which is also a lot.
And I just really want to encourage people, like I did last week with Ann Waldman, to check out the full recording of Ray Armantrout's visit to us as a Kelly Writers House Fellow. It was a really great session. She gave a reading that was extremely moving, read a lot of her poems about battling cancer, and just great work. And so I really recommend, if you Google Kelly Writers House Fellows, you'll be able to find it. And she was a fellow in 2014. So you'll be able to find her reading, or I might post a link in my office hours, which are 8 o'clock tomorrow morning.
Fantastic. Jason, final thought.
A huge warning for next week that if you had trouble with connecting to the language, so this is for Layla specifically. Layla, if you had trouble connecting to the language poets, you're going to have even more trouble connecting this next week, perhaps, at first. So I really recommend doing a few chance exercises, like stand up in the middle of your room and spin around until you're about to fall down and point at something. And then when you see what you're pointing to, look at it and study it closely and try to value it more than anything else you've ever seen, and then get up and do it again and again.
Oh, wait a minute. I don't know what our liability clauses are, but this is a 13-year-old homeschooled kid.
Yes,
and you're
exactly.
having her spin around till she's dizzy and do it repeatedly. I'm kidding,
Yes.
Jason.
And then you
Yes.
can study, never mind.
Oh, don't try this at home. Thank you, Jason. Anna Strong, final thought.
Can I tell a quick story?
Yeah.
Okay.
Quick.
So last year, when I was on the job hunt, I got the chance to teach a sample class at a very traditional, very wonderful, but very traditionally taught all-boys school. And the teacher told me, they were juniors, and the teacher told me, they're reading Walt Whitman, so this should be like right in your forte, like, teach them some Walt Whitman. And I was like, nah, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to see if I can make something or make a lesson that shows them how Whitman is still relevant to us now. And that's kind of where we're ending up in the next 2 weeks. So instead of teaching some Walt Whitman, I taught them some Mike McGee. And I told the teacher I was going to do this. He calls the head of the department and he says, we need to put a pin in this. We can't let her do this. So the teacher came up with this lesson plan. The head of the department calls me the night before and he says, please do not do this. They're not going to get it. They're not going to like it. What are you thinking? And I was like, you know what? I've done this before. I really think it's going to work and I stand by it. And I kid you not, according to the teacher who I talked to just last week, because he's become a friend, they still ask about it and they want to know more about Mike McGee. So,
And Anna Strong, I bet.
well, not really. It's really just Mike McGee. They got to play with the Pledge of Allegiance and make their own versions of the Pledge of Allegiance. So I guess I would just say that for people who are feeling disconnected from this stuff, this actually is the language that's all around us, so much more than Dickinson and Whitman, wonderful as they are. This is the language that we experience. This is the language that's all around us. This is the language that is our own language, and that's what makes this stuff so great. So.
And that's Mike McGee. Oh, we're getting some snaps from Dave. And that's Mike McGee, whose Flarf-ish poems we're going to be seeing in Chapter 10. Right? I'm Chapter 9.3, Week 10.
So he's coming up, but
Yeah. Okay, great. So I'm just going to do a couple of shout-outs, and then we're all done for the evening. Imogene Hicks, many of us know from the discussion forums. She lives in a small New Zealand town, never went to university. All my life, I've adored poetry, reading and writing it. ModPo has opened doors for me to attend a community where I can be with like-minded people who have the same passion as I do for poetry. This means so much to me emotionally and intellectually. The course has stimulated me immensely and fed my passion too. So a big shout out to all the ModPo TAs from Imogene, who ModPo is her university. That's pretty cool, and it's free, and she's in New Zealand, and it's a long way away. Marianne S., popping in to say hello. She popped into the, what do we call it, hopelessly lost thread. Not lost, she says, just less active than I'd hoped to be this time around. Guess I'm more of a lurker this year, trying to catch up, etc. Something I'd like to see come up as a topic in the next few weeks is engaging with poetry beyond ModPo. Would be interesting to see how other people have taken this forward and getting more ideas. I've been reading lots, going to readings. I'm in a writer's workshop now, a couple of meetups with writers and artists balancing creative life, sometimes with day jobs. May read a couple of poems in public in the near future. Terrifying. None of these things I would have imagined being interested in a couple of years ago. ModPo really opened up a world of discovery. I hope other folks find that as well. And two people in our high school teens thread. One of them, the aforementioned Layla. The other is Riley. Riley is a high school senior. Hello, senior in high school here, he says, thinking about the future and such, and figured it was a good time to start driving myself toward the horizon. He's not even driving yet, and he's imagining that. I didn't really seek out the writing trek until late in my freshman year of high school. So late. I'm also super lazy, so let's see if I can finally commit myself to something. I'm having positive feelings toward this, so let's see how this goes. He wrote that on the first day of ModPo on September 12th, and since then, I checked it, he has posted 350 posts, replies, and threads. He's not super lazy. Let's see if I can finally commit myself to something. Well, he certainly did. And then there's Layla, and here's how Layla introduced herself way back on the first day. I'm a young homeschooler with a love for learning and a desire to grow my knowledge in as many subjects as my brain can manage. My main academic interests regard literature, yet I am open to learning anything. I am currently studying French and hope to be able to speak the language fluently, and I would love to live in Britain and hope to go to Oxford University someday. In my free time, I enjoy reading, writing, listening to Arcade Fire, and watching just about anything the BBC has made. Well, Layla, if all our 13-year-olds were as together as that, we'd be...
Layla actually came to my for teachers discussion to ask me how poetry was taught in the colleges here and in high school. And we had an amazing discussion about pedagogy. It was wonderful.
Is she really 13, do you think?
Yeah, I don't know if I believe you're 13, Layla.
She's probably a teacher.
And we told her, it was like, you're not missing out on high school pedagogy for poetry. I was like, stay homeschooled. I begged to be homeschooled.
You did yourself?
Yes, because I was so bored in my English classes. I was like, the only thing you're missing is a very misconstrued portrait of Emily Dickinson in an attic with no friends. I was like, keep homeschooling.
Is it possible that the Teacher Resource Center can be a node for parents and not just teachers, parents who are homeschooling their kids, at least in this area? Obviously, they'd need a couple of other subject matters, not just poetry.
I think so.
Yeah,
I think that we
I think
could
so
add,
too.
yeah.
That would be really cool. Well, thank you, Layla. And finally, just from the voicemail, Deborah Josephson. We'll go out with Deborah. We'll listen to Deborah, and we'll say goodnight. I just want to make sure I thank everybody. Those who came. John Womack, all the way from Michigan. Yeah. Janice, Nelson, Brian, Andrea, Michael, drawing. He's already finished. Mary, John, Kirby, Dave Bender, Erica. Hello, Erica. Thank you. Thanks for coming tonight. Allie didn't make the audio connection, so she left. Emily has gone. And there's Dave Poplar, though. Thanks, Dave. Carlos, Caroline, and Lily, thank you so much. And Anna Strong, who was waiting for me to forget here. All right, we're going to... And Jason, too. And, of course, these two guys over here, Chris and Zach, once again, miracle workers. Total miracle workers. Okay, so we'll let Deborah Josephson, whatever she's going to say. This was 512-95-ModPo, 512-95-ModPo. And here's Deborah.
Hi, it's Deborah Josephson, and I'm from Burbank, California. And as you know, I've never called in. I've been too shy. So thank you for this. This is great. it's my 4th year with ModPo, or 2nd year with ModPo Plus, and I'd like to say, Julia Block, I really love listening to you lead the open readings. It's a privilege to be able to participate with you, and I really hope you record more and more. This is a great opportunity, and I'm grateful. I feel that way about everyone. Each voice is fantastic, but I really want to acknowledge Julia. I feel as if I were a young poet instead of an old one. I'd come to Penn to be your students, so you're very special. And the other thing that I wanted to say is I was catching up on the webcast, and wow, I think what makes this style of teaching so fantastic, this open, non-lecture style, is that it's a way of life and not just a college technique for learning. ModPo makes poetry a community experience and a spoken and shared one where every voice counts, and we just keep growing and growing. And that's art, creativity, and learning as a way of life, and anyone can do it. Poetry is the trigger, and I think this is revolutionary, and the difference is spreading.
Wow, that was really great. I hope Deborah's listening, but let's give her a big hand for that. That was fantastic. And so we're going out with T's reminder. Zach? There it is. T says do the work, and when T says do the work, you'd better do the work. 9.1, the rest of this week, please catch up, and then we'll start on 9.2. And we didn't tell you this yet, but we are writing essays next week, which is crazy. And then in week 10, we're going to be peer reviewing them again. So anyway, thank you, everybody, and good night, and we'll see you next week.